Little black girl calls 911 and says, "I can't close my legs." What doctors uncover next sparks absolute panic. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The call came in just after midnight. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly inside the police station, casting pale shadows across the linoleum floor. It was a quiet shift, just a few minor noise complaints, one traffic call, and silence thick enough to stretch. Officer Denise Holder leaned back in her chair, nursing the last of her vending machine coffee, when the dispatcher's voice broke the calm. Caller is a minor. 8-year-old female. Says she cannot close her legs. A brief pause followed. Then a frown. She says her name is Ayanna. The silence that followed was different. It had weight. Officer Holder straightened in her seat. "Patch it through," she said quickly. The line clicked, then a voice, barely a whisper. "Hello? My name is Ayanna, and I cannot close my legs. It hurts." Her voice was small. Controlled. As if she had rehearsed every word to make someone believe her. Officer Holder's hand tightened around her pen. "Sweetheart, where are you? Are you safe right now?" But Ayanna did not answer that. She simply breathed. "Did someone hurt you?" Officer Holder tried again, keeping her voice low, even. The girl sounded alone. From the other side of the room, Sergeant Wilkes glanced up from his crossword puzzle. "What is it now?" "Little girl on the line," Holder murmured. "Says she can't close her legs." Wilkes scoffed. "Probably another exaggeration. Could be a prank. Kids from those neighborhoods get real creative." Holder shot him a look. "She sounds serious." "Yeah, they always do. Ask her where her parents are." Holder ignored him. "Ayanna, is anyone with you?" A long silence. "I am in the closet," Ayanna whispered. "Mama is sleeping. She said not to wake her unless I was bleeding. But I am not bleeding." The line crackled faintly. Holder felt a chill settle under her skin. "Can you tell me your address, Ayanna?" The girl hesitated. Then, slowly, she recited numbers. Wilkes looked over again. "What did I tell you? Same block as last week's false alarm. Waste of time." But Holder was already grabbing her jacket. "I'm going." "You sure? You know the report we filed got tossed last time. No charges. Mother claimed she fell off a chair." Holder paused. "This does not sound like a fall. The street was only 7 minutes away." Holder's patrol car cut through the darkness, headlights sweeping over cracked sidewalks and rusting chain-link fences. The house was small, dim, silent. One porch light flickered overhead. She knocked once. No answer. Twice. Still nothing. Then, bare feet. A light thump. And the door creaked open. Ayanna stood there, frozen. She wore a long t-shirt, several sizes too big. Her hair was tied back into a loose bun. Her cheeks were wet with tears, but she was not crying anymore. Her eyes did not blink. They stared straight at Officer Holder, eyes full of something heavier than fear. Holder bent down slowly. "Ayanna?" The girl nodded. "I'm Officer Holder. You called for help?" A nod again. Slower this time. Her eyes darted behind her, as if checking for monsters that might still be lurking. "Are you alone?" "My mama is home. But she is not awake." Holder gestured gently. "Can I come in?" Ayanna stepped aside. The hallway was narrow. Faint smell of bleach and old blankets. On the floor, a broken plastic doll lay in the corner. The house was silent except for the soft hum of an old refrigerator. They reached the living room. Ayana sat on the couch, legs apart, not from carelessness but necessity. Her body looked stiff. Guarded. "Can you tell me what is wrong, sweetheart?" Holder asked softly. The girl opened her mouth. Then closed it. Her hands clutched a small piece of paper, torn at the edges, folded and refolded. Holder crouched next to her. "Take your time." Ayana looked down. Her voice barely rose above a breath. "He said I would be fine if I kept quiet. But I cannot close my legs now. I tried all day. They won't move." Holder's heart dropped. "Who said that, Ayana?" She did not answer. Instead, she held out the paper. Holder unfolded it carefully. A child's drawing. A man's face. No name, but the eyes were hollow. Cruel. And then Ayana whispered 5 words that made the entire room freeze. "He said I broke the rules." The officers exchanged glances, uneasy, unsure. Sergeant Wilkes leaned against the station wall, arms folded tight across his chest. His gaze stayed fixed on the little black girl sitting alone on the metal bench, her legs carefully apart, hands tucked in her lap like she had something to prove. "She does not look hurt," he muttered under his breath. Officer Holder, still in her jacket, turned sharply. "She said she cannot close her legs." "Did you even read the call log?" Wilkes shrugged. "I read enough." 8 years old. Black. From a part of town that rings our phones every other night. Could be anything. Ayana sat quietly. She was not crying. That was what made it worse. Her stillness. The way her eyes never wandered, like they were locked in place by something she had seen but could not speak. A junior officer, Torres, walked in with a clipboard. Mother was found in the back room. Asleep. Smelled like gin. Wilkes scoffed. There we go. Another case of neglect. Not abuse. Holder clenched her jaw. She was hiding in a closet, Sergeant. She said she cannot move her legs. That is not normal. Wilkes raised an eyebrow. And yet, there are no visible injuries. No blood. Could be overreaction. Kids like her always exaggerate. You know that. Holder froze. Kids like her. She looked over at Ayana again. The child's chin quivered slightly, but her eyes stayed dry. Strong. Watching. She is not exaggerating, Holder said, her voice sharp now. She is scared. Torres stepped closer. Should we take her to the hospital? Wilkes sighed. Protocol says yes, but we do not have an incident report yet. No accused person, no crime. Just a kid with vague symptoms. Holder's voice grew colder. She told me someone said she broke the rules. She handed me a drawing of a man's face. Wilkes frowned. A drawing? Yes, Holder said. It was not just scribbles. It was focused. Precise. She drew the eyes like she remembered them in a nightmare. Wilkes hesitated, then finally shrugged. You want to take her in, go ahead. But do not expect backup for a fantasy. Holder stared at him in disbelief. This is not a fantasy. This is trauma. But Wilkes had already turned away, muttering about wasted resources. Inside the exam room, Ayana sat on the padded bench, legs still carefully spread apart. She did not move. The doctor had not arrived yet. Just the nurse, who hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak or wait. Ayana's voice broke the quiet. Is it my fault if I told someone? The nurse blinked. What do you mean, honey? Ayana did not answer. In the hall, Holder watched from behind the one-way glass. Every part of her screamed to kick down every door between that little girl and the truth. But the others, they looked away. Torres leaned in, whispering, "You really believe this, don't you?" Holder nodded. "I do." She could be confused. Or she could be broken in a way we cannot see yet. In the room, Ayanna suddenly flinched. The nurse had asked to touch her ankle, and the girl jerked back like it was fire. "I am sorry," she whispered. I do not like hands near me." Outside, Wilkes sighed again, loud enough for all to hear. "We are treating this like a crime scene when it is probably just a poor parenting situation." Holder turned to face him. "You had no idea the truth would be far worse than anything you imagined." And what she said next would erase every trace of doubt. "I only remember the sound of his belt." Her next words shattered the silence. Ayanna's whisper hung in the air like a thunderclap. "I only remember the sound of his belt." The words were so soft they almost disappeared, but the effect was immediate. The nurse froze mid-step. Officer Holder's pen slipped from her fingers. Even Sergeant Wilkes looked up, his usual smirk erased. Inside the exam room, Ayanna sat stiff as a wooden figurine. Her thin fingers twisted the edge of her shirt. She stared at the floor tiles, refusing to look up. Holder stepped into the room, kneeling so her face was level with Ayanna's. "Sweetheart," she said, voice trembling slightly, "who made that sound? Who did this to you?" Ayanna's eyes flickered to the door and back down again. I do not know if I am allowed to say his name," she whispered. "He said I would be punished." Holder swallowed hard. "You are safe here. No one can hurt you right now. Can you tell me?" Ayanna's lips parted, then pressed shut. Her small chest rose and fell quickly. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, where Wilkes stood with crossed arms. The sergeant's expression was blank, but his presence felt heavy. Wilkes exhaled loudly. "This doesn't sound believable. 8 years old, claiming this." He shook his head. "She's probably mixing up things she saw on TV." Holder spun toward him. "Do you hear yourself? This girl is telling us she's been violated, and you're worried about TV plots?" Wilkes's jaw tightened. "I'm worried about wasting time." In the corner, the nurse tried again, gently. "Ayanna, honey, we need to check you to make sure you're not hurt inside. Is that okay?" Ayanna flinched. "No. No more touching. Please." She held her knees stiffly, fists clenched white. Her body trembled, but not from cold, from something older and deeper. Fear of silence. Fear of speaking. Fear of being ignored again. Holder crouched closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "I believe you. Even if no one else does, I do. You are brave." Ayanna blinked, tears gathering but not falling. "He said brave girls get punished worse," she murmured. Holder's throat tightened. "No one will punish you now," she said firmly, as much for herself as for the child. "We're going to find out the truth." Wilkes scoffed again. "Find out what? That she fell off a bike? That her mama's boyfriend yelled at her? We have no suspect, no crime scene, nothing but a scared kid and a drawing." Holder's voice dropped to a low growl. "And that should be enough to act." The nurse stepped forward, holding a pair of latex gloves. Her voice was quiet but determined. "I'm calling the on-call pediatric trauma specialist. We can't delay." Wilkes muttered under his breath, overreacting. But Ayanna's trembling grew worse. She clutched her shirt tighter, rocking slightly back and forth. He said if I told, he would," her voice cracked. "He said my mama would die." Holder reached out slowly, palm up. "No one will die, sweetheart. You're safe now. You can tell me." Ayanna's tiny voice was almost inaudible. It was at church. The word struck the room like a hammer. The nurse froze again. Holder's eyes widened. Even Wilkes stopped fidgeting. At church? Holder repeated softly. Ayanna nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. He wears a collar. He says prayers. He said I was chosen. The nurse's gloved hands trembled. Dear God. Holder's heart pounded. This was bigger than she feared. Ayanna took a shaky breath. He said if I told anyone, they would call me a liar because of my skin. He said no one believes girls like me. Holder felt her stomach drop. This was not just a crime, it was a trap laid inside a system that already doubted her. Wilkes's voice broke the silence at last, rough and unsure. You're saying a priest? A pastor? Ayanna closed her eyes, silent now. Holder straightened, eyes blazing. We need to move her now. Hospital. CPS. Evidence kit. Wilkes looked like he wanted to argue, but no words came out. Holder turned back to Ayanna, speaking softly. You are safe now. I promise. But the child's face did not soften. She stared at the floor, whispering to herself. Safe means quiet. Safe means quiet. Holder felt the weight of it. This was only the beginning. But this was only the beginning. Voices rose inside the station, conflict brewing. The small station's walls seemed to close in as officers spoke over each other. Phones rang, a printer clattered in the background, and fluorescent lights hummed overhead. In the middle of the chaos sat Ayanna on a hard metal chair, her legs stiff, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes stared at the floor. She did not blink. She's saying it was at church? Torres whispered, glancing toward Ayanna as though she were a dangerous secret herself. Holder nodded. That's what she said. Wilkes's voice cut through the room. We're not dragging a respected man's name through the mud because of a child's story. Do you have any idea what that will do to our department if it turns out false? Holder spun around, anger rising. Do you have any idea what it will do to her if it's true and we do nothing? Wilkes shrugged, but his eyes flickered with unease. Protocol. We need evidence. She is evidence, Holder snapped. Her body. Her words. Her terror. That's evidence. Torres looked between them, unsure. Should we at least get CPS involved? The sergeant shook his head. We've had too many false alarms from that neighborhood. Do you remember last year? 2 separate cases collapsed in court. We're not going down that road again. Holder felt her stomach twist. You mean we're not going down that road for this child? Because she's black. Because her mother lives on the south side. Because she isn't the right kind of victim. Ayanna shifted slightly in her chair, but her face stayed blank. She seemed to shrink further into herself, as though she were fading. Sweetheart, Holder said gently, kneeling again, we're trying to help you. Do you understand? Ayanna whispered, he said nobody would believe me. Holder's throat tightened. I believe you. The room fell silent. Only the sound of the clock ticking on the far wall filled the air. Then Torres cleared his throat. If you're so sure, let's take her to the hospital. At least we'll have something on record. Wilkes rubbed his temples. Fine. But you're filing the report. If this backfires, it's on you. Holder ignored him. Get the car ready. Ayanna's eyes flicked to the door, then to Holder. Am I going to jail? She asked softly. Holder's chest ached. No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. We're taking you somewhere safe. Ayanna did not move. She just stared. He said police don't like little girls like me. Holder swallowed hard, blinking back her own tears. That's not true. Not here. Not with me. Behind them, Wilkes muttered, you're making promises you can't keep. Holder glared at him. Watch me keep them. They led Ayana out into the night. The patrol car's headlights flickered across cracked pavement. The child climbed into the back seat slowly, her small body tense like a coiled spring. She gripped the seatbelt with both hands, knuckles white. Holder slid into the front passenger seat and turned back toward her. We're going to the hospital now. Some people there will check you, okay? They'll be gentle. Ayana's eyes filled but no tears fell. He said gentle means pain. Holder closed her eyes for a moment. Not this time. In the driver's seat, Torres glanced at Holder. You're sure about this? Holder met his gaze. I have to be. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. As the car pulled out of the lot, the night seemed heavier than before. Holder's gut told her something waited at that hospital, something they had not even begun to imagine. She kept her eyes on the road, her voice steady for Ayana's sake, but her hands trembled slightly. The evidence was waiting in plain sight. And yet, the evidence was waiting in plain sight. Then something changed everything. The hospital lights buzzed above their heads, harsh and white. Cold air wrapped around Ayana as she sat trembling on the edge of the examination table, her legs still apart, her body refusing to move. The paper beneath her crinkled with every slight shift. Holder stood nearby, arms crossed tight, watching the room like a shield. A pediatric nurse moved gently, voice soft. Ayana, I'm just going to take your temperature, okay? Ayana flinched at the word take, but nodded. Outside the room, a tall male doctor reviewed the chart Holder had handed him. No visible blood. No sign of fracture. Might be a muscle injury, he said without looking up. She says she cannot close her legs, Holder repeated, firmer now. He glanced up, mildly annoyed. It could be psychosomatic. That kind of trauma can be imagined, especially with children from, he stopped, but the implication hung in the air. Holder finished for him. From where? Black neighborhoods? He exhaled, clearly used to brushing off concern. I'll take a look. But let's not jump to conclusions. He entered the room, his voice shifting into something rehearsed and sterile. Hi there, Ayana. I'm Dr. LeMay. I just want to make sure you're okay. Ayana did not respond. Her eyes locked on the ceiling. He gestured to the nurse. Let's go ahead and lift her gown, just a quick check. Holder stepped forward. She's scared. She needs to understand what's happening. The doctor offered a faint smile. We need to act now. Delaying this won't help her. The nurse carefully lifted the hem of Ayana's oversized shirt. What they saw stopped the room. Bruises. Dark, deep, recent. Around her thighs. In her hips. The tissue red and swollen. The doctor's face shifted. This isn't a fall. Ayana squeezed her eyes shut. Please don't touch. Holder's voice cracked. We won't. Not unless you say yes, Ayana. You have the right to say no. But the nurse was already holding a swab. She needs a kit, she said, almost whispering. Dr. LeMay's tone changed, quick, defensive. It could still be accidental. Kids climb fences, ride bikes. Holder's voice turned sharp. You just said it wasn't a fall. The doctor's eyes darted between them. We should wait for CPS before making any assumptions. She already told us she was hurt at church, Holder replied. By someone she trusted. That man is still out there. Ayana's voice was barely audible. I told the sky, but it didn't tell anyone. The nurse paused. What did you say, sweetheart? Ayana looked at the ceiling. I told the sky. I whispered the truth. But the sky stayed quiet. The nurse's eyes glistened. She stepped back, visibly shaken. Dr. LeMay cleared his throat. "We'll process the kit. I'll report it." Holder didn't move. "You'll report it, or I will. And I'll name every person who failed her before now." Ayanna blinked slowly, still watching the ceiling as if the lights might carry her away. The nurse gently laid a warm blanket over her shoulders. "You're very brave, Ayanna. So brave." Ayanna whispered, "He said brave means I like it." The nurse covered her mouth with her hand. Holder turned away, holding on to the edge of the curtain, her eyes burning. The machines beeped. A printer spat out paperwork. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, but in that room, everything stood still. Because now, the pain had a shape. The truth had a mark. And Ayanna had spoken. But what she whispered next made even the doctor go pale. This was not the first time. 3 weeks earlier, the school hallway buzzed with morning chatter, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, teachers reminding students to line up. Inside room 204, Ayanna sat in the back row, knees angled apart, shifting awkwardly in her chair. Her 4th grade teacher, Miss Reynolds, glanced at her once, then returned to grading papers. "Close your legs, please," Miss Reynolds said without looking up. Ayanna did not respond. She simply adjusted her dress and turned her face toward the window. At recess, she limped slightly on the blacktop. When a ball bounced toward her, she flinched instead of kicking it. Another student, Cameron, asked, "Why do you walk like that?" Ayanna shrugged. "It just hurts sometimes." He nodded like it made sense. No one asked again. Back inside, Miss Reynolds noticed her slow steps. "Everything okay, Ayanna?" Ayanna opened her mouth, then closed it. She gave a soft smile, like she had practiced. "Yes, ma'am." Reynolds hesitated, then moved on. Later that week, the school nurse, Mrs. Kent, marked an entry in her log. Ayanna J. complained of soreness near thighs. No visible bruises. Advised rest. She considered calling home but remembered the last time. Ayanna's mother had answered in a slurred voice. Said everything was fine. Told the nurse not to call again unless it was an emergency. Mrs. Kent stared at the number for a long time. Then closed the file. That Friday, during art class, Ayanna drew a picture of a girl in a small room with no windows. In the corner was a tall figure with red eyes and long arms. Her teacher asked about it. "It's a monster," Ayanna said softly. Miss Reynolds smiled politely. "You have a good imagination." She never showed the drawing to anyone. 2 days later, the school held parent conferences. Ayanna's mother did not show. The staff wrote, "No show," beside her name and moved on to the next student. On a Monday morning, Ayanna arrived late. She walked with her arms crossed over her belly, a hoodie tied around her waist. Miss Reynolds pulled her aside. "You've been quiet lately," she said. Ayanna looked down. "I do not like when people are near me." Miss Reynolds hesitated. "Why not?" Ayanna shrugged. "They might touch." That pause, that exact moment, could have changed everything. But the bell rang. Students poured into the classroom. Reynolds stood, brushing off her concern. "Try to stay focused today, all right?" Ayanna nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She never said another word about it. That night, Ayanna sat on her bed with a flashlight, her door locked, whispering into the air. "Please stop. Please stop." No one heard. No one came. She had called once before. 911, she used her mother's phone and whispered into the speaker. "I'm not okay," she said. The operator asked for her name. When she gave it, there was silence. Then the voice asked, where are your parents, honey? Are you supposed to be using this phone? Ayana's voice cracked. I just need help. We need to talk to your parent, sweetie. Ayana ended the call. She never tried again. Not until the night her legs would no longer close. At the hospital now, the weight of silence came crashing in. Holder sat beside her bed, holding the drawing Ayana had made, the one of the man with the hollow eyes and black collar. She compared it to the Sunday bulletin found in Ayana's house. The match was exact. The man was real. The church was real. And the silence had gone on too long. And now the same nightmare was happening again. Finally, someone decided to listen. The pediatric trauma ward smelled faintly of antiseptic and latex. The lights were too bright, the walls too white, the silence too loud. Ayana lay curled on the hospital bed, knees tucked under the blanket, her face turned to the wall. Officer Holder stood by the window, arms crossed, her jaw clenched. For the past 3 hours, she had begged for movement, CPS, an investigator, someone to take the girl's words seriously. But the only responses she received were quiet delays and vague excuses. Until Nurse Carla Davis arrived. She was in her early 40s, a tall black woman with calm eyes and a voice that carried both softness and steel. Her ID badge swung from her chest as she reviewed Ayana's chart. She said she was hurt at church, Holder repeated. Carla glanced up. I read the notes. I read the report. And I saw her face. Holder exhaled. And? She's not lying, Carla said simply. Carla entered the room, her steps measured. She crouched beside Ayana and spoke softly. Hi baby. I'm Nurse Carla. I'm here to help, but only if you want me to. Ayana did not move. Carla reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pink bracelet. My daughter made these. She makes one for every brave girl I meet. Still nothing. Carla placed it gently on the table. You do not have to talk. I'll stay right here anyway. She sat in the chair beside the bed, no clipboard, no gloves. Just presence. After 10 minutes of silence, Ayana whispered, he wears shiny shoes. Carla turned to her gently. Does he now? Ayana nodded. They click when he walks. Carla leaned in slightly. Thank you for telling me. Outside, Holder watched from the glass panel. Torres stood beside her. You think she'll get through to her? He asked. She already is, Holder said. An hour later, Carla met Holder in the hallway. She's starting to trust, Carla said. But we need to move fast. This child is holding back a storm. Holder nodded. I'm trying. But Wilkes won't approve a full investigation without a signed affidavit. Carla's lips thinned. She's 8. She needs safety, not signatures. Holder's voice lowered. I need you to make the call. Carla's brow furrowed. To who? CPS. Mandated escalation. Bypass the sergeant. Carla hesitated. They won't like that. She might not make it another day if we wait. Carla took out her phone and walked away. Moments later, Holder was called into the hallway by the hospital administrator. What's this I hear about you pushing for a full investigation based on a child's drawing? He asked, arms crossed. Holder stayed calm. That child described exact bruising, named a public figure, and detailed trauma that matches what doctors found. That's not protocol. No, Holder said, it's a cry for help that your protocol is trying to silence. Another voice joined them. It was Carla, holding the phone. CPS is en route. I filed under mandatory trauma code. They'll be here within the hour. The administrator's face reddened. You went over our heads. Carla did not flinch. So did he, every time he hurt that child. Holder smiled, just slightly. Back in the room, Ayanna touched the pink bracelet with one finger. Carla returned to her chair. "That's yours now," she said softly. "No one can take it away." Ayanna looked at her, for the first time, really looked. "I told the sky," she whispered. But the sky didn't speak. Carla reached for her hand. "Then let me speak for you." But the truth had only started to unravel. A shadow hung over every word. In the small interview room next to the trauma ward, the air felt colder than the vents could explain. The blinds were half closed. A recorder sat on the table, blinking a steady red light. Ayanna sat in a hospital gown, blanket pulled tightly around her. Carla sat beside her, hand resting gently on her shoulder. Officer Holder knelt across from her, pen in hand, notebook open. No pressure. No loud voices. Just space, space for the truth. "Whenever you are ready," Holder said gently. Ayanna's voice was fragile. "He told me the world would hate me if I told." Holder leaned in. "Who, Ayanna?" She swallowed. "Pastor Dwight." The name fell like a stone. Carla closed her eyes for a second. Holder's grip on the pen tightened. The pastor. A man with columns of community awards. His face had hung in the town hall's rotunda for 10 years. "Did he ever tell you not to speak?" Holder asked, careful with each word. Ayanna nodded. "He said I was chosen. He said pain makes girls stronger. He said God lets some people hurt so they can learn." Holder's throat tightened. "And did anyone else know?" Ayanna's head dropped. "I think one lady saw him take me into the back room. But she didn't say anything." Holder wrote fast, then paused. "Did you ever tell your mom?" Ayanna was silent for a long time. Then, she said church people don't lie. She said if I was scared, it was because I was being sinful. Carla turned her face away, blinking quickly. Outside the room, Sergeant Wilkes paced the hallway. He had been informed of the CPS involvement and was furious. "Pastor Dwight," he hissed. "You're telling me we're building a case against a community leader because of a drawing and a child's word?" Holder stood firm. "Because of medical proof. Because of bruising. Because she named him. She is a child." Wilkes snapped. "And he is a predator," Holder shot back. Wilkes muttered something about lawsuits and public image, but his voice faded. Back in the room, Carla leaned close. "You're doing something brave, Ayanna. You are not alone." Ayanna looked up slowly. "Then why does it still feel like I'm the only one who sees it?" Carla blinked, holding her gaze. "Because when the truth is ugly, people turn their heads." A silence settled again. But something inside Ayanna shifted. She straightened, just slightly. "I remember the smell," she said. "His cologne. The one he only wears for the big sermons." Holder wrote it down. Every detail. Every word. Then Ayanna said something else, so quiet Carla had to ask her to repeat it. "He used to say the sky would forgive him before anyone else knew. Would you keep driving, or call back up right then?" As the interview ended, Holder rose to her feet. She stepped outside and made a call directly to the district attorney's office. No more delays. No more silence. But the receptionist on the line hesitated. "We'll review the documentation first. Pastor Dwight is a respected figure." Holder's hand shook. "He is a predator." The reply came, cold and distant. "We will get back to you." Inside the hospital, Ayanna finally laid down, the blanket tucked under her chin. Carla dimmed the lights. But neither of them felt peace. Because outside that room, the worst was still to come. And the worst was still to come. Soon, the entire community knew. The morning sun rose quietly over Willow County, but peace did not come with it. By 8 a.m., whispers had become headlines. Local pastor under investigation for abuse allegations. Community divided as child accuses beloved leader. The town's church bulletin was cancelled. The weekly food drive was postponed. And for the first time in 15 years, the sanctuary doors of New Grace Fellowship stayed shut. In grocery aisles, parking lots, and Facebook comment threads, people took sides. Most did not know Ayanna's name. But they knew the name of the man she had named. Pastor Dwight J. Hammond. His portrait still hung in the school hallway, right beside the Volunteer of the Year plaque. His voice still echoed in minds, Sunday sermons about grace, redemption, purity. "It's a lie," a woman whispered at the diner. That little girl probably misunderstood. Dwight would never. At the pharmacy counter, a man muttered, "This is what happens when you let broken homes raise children. They make things up for attention." Outside the school, a small group of parents had gathered. "Are our children safe?" one mother asked. "From who?" a father replied. "A girl who cries abuse or the man who built half this town's shelter programs?" Inside her small home, Ayanna stayed quiet. CPS had moved her temporarily. She was in a new room, in a new bed, with silence too big to fill. The pink bracelet Carla gave her was on her wrist. She stared at it for hours. "They don't believe me," she whispered. The foster woman, Miss Claire, turned down the TV and walked over. "Some people need time. The truth scares them." Ayanna asked, "Why does the truth scare grown-ups?" Claire knelt beside her. "Because once they admit it, they cannot pretend anymore." At the police station, Holder watched the reports pour in. Calls from church members. Angry emails. Letters threatening lawsuits. Her inbox was flooded with words like accusation, defamation, regret. But none said, "We believe her." Wilkes walked past her desk, slapping a folder onto the table. Communities fired up. "If you had waited, maybe this wouldn't have exploded." Holder stood. "She told us the truth. And the truth deserves to explode." Wilkes lowered his voice. "You're protecting a child. I respect that. But you're up against a man whose reputation could ruin yours." "She is 8, Holder hissed. "She cannot close her legs without pain. Her body is a crime scene. His reputation is not my concern." Wilkes looked away. At church, Pastor Dwight stood at the pulpit during a hastily arranged press conference. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "A tragic one. I love all my congregants. I would never harm a child." His voice cracked. But his eyes did not. Behind him stood 6 elders. All white. All silent. In the crowd, some wept. Some clapped. Some stood still, unsure what to feel. But then, a voice cut through the noise. "She told me what you did." The room turned. It was Ms. Denise, the church's custodian. A quiet woman. Black. Widowed. Always in the back, sweeping between pews. "She told me," Denise repeated. "I saw you take her into that back room. I knew something was wrong. And I said nothing. Because I was scared of you." A gasp rolled through the sanctuary. Pastor Dwight froze. Denise's hands trembled. "I failed her. But I will not stay silent now." Holder watched the footage later, tears welling. Someone had finally broken ranks. But then, a voice cut through the noise. The room erupted. The courtroom walls were tall, lined with polished wood, but they did nothing to soften the tension inside. Journalists filled the back benches. Community members sat with arms folded or hands wringing nervously. The front row was a storm of emotions, some red with anger, others pale with disbelief. Ayanna sat at the front, so small she barely reached the edge of the witness stand. Her feet dangled above the floor, a pink bracelet peeking from under the long sleeves of her dress. Officer Holder sat behind her, her gaze steady. Carla Davis, the nurse, was on the left side, hands clasped, jaw tight. To the right, Pastor Dwight Hammond, clean-shaven, calm, in a dark suit. He sat flanked by two lawyers, his Bible placed neatly before him. His expression was unreadable. Almost peaceful. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Can you tell us your name?" Ayanna's voice was barely a whisper. "Ayanna. How old are you?" 8. "And do you know why you're here today?" She nodded, slowly. "Because I told the truth." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. The defense attorney stood. Objection. Leading the witness. The judge waved it off. Overruled. Let her speak. The prosecutor continued gently. "Ayanna, do you remember the man who hurt you?" Ayanna nodded again. Her eyes flickered toward the defense table, then away. "Yes," she whispered. "What did he say to you, when he," the lawyer paused, choosing words carefully. "When he took you into that room at the church?" Ayanna's face paled. She pulled the sleeves of her dress over her hands, rubbing her palms against the fabric. "He said I was chosen. He said my pain was part of God's love. He told me not to cry." Someone in the gallery gasped. Pastor Dwight leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something. The prosecutor moved slowly. "Did you cry?" Ayanna blinked. "I tried not to. But I did." "And what did he do then?" Ayanna looked up at the ceiling. "He said I was ruining it. That if I ever told, I would go to jail for lying." The defense attorney rose quickly. "This is all hearsay. We have no physical evidence directly linking my client to any act of abuse." Holder clenched her fists. Carla whispered under her breath, "And yet her body tells the story." The judge turned to the jury. "You will disregard that last statement from the defense." The prosecutor walked to the evidence table. She lifted a large folder. "This is the hospital's medical report. It details specific injuries, tears, bruises, trauma. And here," she said, holding up a drawing, "is Ayanna's sketch. It predates any official interview. It matches Pastor Hammond's face exactly, down to the mole on his cheek." Whispers grew louder in the courtroom. The defense objected again. "This is an emotional manipulation of the jury." The judge banged the gavel once. "Enough." The prosecutor approached the stand again. "Ayanna, do you want to stop?" Ayanna shook her head. "Are you ready to say something more?" Ayanna paused. Her breath trembled. She looked toward Carla, then Holder. Their eyes held hers like anchors. She turned back to the room. Her voice rose, higher than before. "He said I was invisible. That no one would believe a little black girl." The silence was instant. No one moved. Even the judge leaned back slowly, stunned. Pastor Dwight's face twitched. Ayanna pressed her palms together. "He said I'd forget it someday. But I didn't. I never will." Holder whispered, "You are not invisible." The prosecutor nodded slowly. "Thank you, Ayanna. You are brave beyond words." But the trial was far from over. The cross-examination had not begun. The community was not yet convinced. And Pastor Dwight was not done fighting. And then she said the words nobody expected. This was the breaking point. The courtroom was hushed. Ayanna had just said the words that shattered every pretense of doubt. He said no one believes a little black girl. Some gasped. Some shifted uncomfortably. And some, those who had seen too many cases like this dissolve into silence, felt something crack inside. But the defense was not finished. Pastor Dwight's attorney stood slowly, buttoning his blazer. "Miss Ayanna," he began, his tone calm, calculated. "You are a very bright little girl, aren't you?" Ayanna nodded slightly. "You draw very well, yes? You like to write stories?" She blinked. "Sometimes." "Imaginative stories?" The courtroom grew tense. Ayanna looked confused. "I only tell the truth." The attorney nodded sympathetically. "Of course. But sometimes, when things are hard to understand, people your age might dream things up, yes?" Ayanna's hands gripped the edge of the witness seat. This was not a dream. He leaned in, voice soft but sharp. "Did anyone ever tell you to say Pastor Dwight's name? Did anyone suggest that he hurt you?" "No," she whispered. "Did you see him do anything bad to anyone else?" Ayanna shook her head. "He only hurt me." "Then how do we know it really happened?" Her mouth opened. No words came. Holder leaned forward, ready to jump in, but the prosecutor raised a hand. "Wait." The judge narrowed her eyes. And then, the courtroom doors opened. A woman in a white coat stepped in, escorted by a court officer. Dr. Eliza Monroe, the pediatric forensic examiner. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Dr. Monroe took the stand. She laid her folder gently on the table before her. "I conducted Ayanna's exam the night she was brought in. The physical findings were consistent with prolonged abuse." The defense attorney crossed his arms. "But you cannot prove who caused those injuries, can you?" Dr. Monroe flipped to a page. "Actually, I can." Gasps echoed. She lifted a sealed envelope. "With court approval, we conducted a DNA swab. From clothing collected the night of the incident. The results came in this morning." The judge leaned forward. "You may continue." Dr. Monroe opened the envelope. Her voice was steady. "Clinical. Devastating. DNA belonging to Pastor Dwight Hammond was found on Ayanna's undergarments. It is a direct match." The room exploded. Reporters stood, flashing cameras. Jurors froze. One woman clapped her hand over her mouth. The defense attorney stammered. "Objection. Objection to surprise evidence." "Sustained," the judge said, but the damage was done. Ayanna sat still. Her lips trembled. "Does that mean people believe me now?" Carla whispered, "They cannot ignore it anymore." Pastor Dwight's face remained rigid. He stared ahead, his mouth tight, his knuckles white. Holder stood. "It's over." And it was. Not the pain. Not the memories. But the wall of silence had broken. The system had finally listened. The courtroom had heard the voice they were never meant to believe. And for the first time, silence filled with hope. The tide began to turn. The courtroom emptied slowly that afternoon. Reporters clustered outside, microphones raised. Camera shutters clicked like ticking clocks. But inside, something far more important was happening. Ayanna sat with her knees pulled to her chest on a small padded bench in the hallway, away from the chaos. The pink bracelet still circled her wrist, faintly glowing in the sunlight that slipped through the tall windows. Holder stood nearby, arms crossed tightly, watching her like a hawk. Carla sat beside her, hand resting gently on Ayanna's back. "I said the truth," Ayanna whispered. Carla nodded. "You did. And now they cannot bury it anymore." Ayanna looked up. "Will he go to jail?" "Soon," Holder said. "Very soon." For the first time in weeks, Ayanna exhaled a full breath. Down the hall, Judge Maynard sat behind closed doors with the district attorney and Sergeant Wilkes. Her voice was firm. This court owes that child more than a verdict. We owe her an apology. Wilkes shifted in his seat. We followed protocol. No, Judge Maynard interrupted. You followed a pattern. She tapped the file in front of her. She reported pain. She showed signs. She said the name. And you all, every level of this system, hesitated. You dismissed, delayed, doubted. The DA cleared his throat. We did not have enough at first. You did not want enough, the judge said coldly. Because she is black. Because she is poor. Because she lives where justice does not always reach. Wilkes swallowed hard. We were trying not to overreact. You underreacted, she snapped. And it almost cost her everything. That afternoon, the town school board held an emergency meeting. Teachers, administrators, parents gathered in a crowded auditorium. Miss Reynolds, Ayanna's teacher, stood behind the podium. Her hands shook. I missed it, she said. I saw her limping. I saw her flinch. I heard her say she did not like people near her. And I moved on. Because I thought she was just shy. Because I believed the wrong things. A tear rolled down her cheek. I failed her. The crowd was silent. In the back, Mrs. Kent, the school nurse, stood slowly. I had her file. I saw patterns. But I let my own assumptions write the ending. I assumed the home was broken. I assumed she would not talk. I assumed someone else would notice. People lowered their heads. For the first time, regret filled the room. That evening, the city council approved a motion. Every abuse report would now trigger an automatic secondary review when the victim was under 10, especially from underserved communities. Mandatory follow-up within 24 hours. No exceptions. Holder watched the meeting live stream on her phone, still seated beside Ayanna's hospital bed. She's not just a case, Holder whispered. She is the reason the next girl might be heard. Carla nodded. She is the reason they are listening. At New Grace Fellowship, the sanctuary lights were off. Pastor Dwight's portrait had been removed. A white sheet covered the pulpit. Outside, a note was taped to the door. To the one we failed, we see you now. Ayanna's name was not written on it. But everyone knew. But the fight was not over yet. The final blow landed. The courtroom was packed. Not a single seat remained empty. The air was thick, heavy with anticipation, silent with fear. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras off for now. This moment was sacred. Ayanna sat quietly between Officer Holder and Nurse Carla. Her hair had been gently braided, a small butterfly clip tucked behind her ear. She wore a clean dress, navy blue, with sleeves that touched her wrists. She had chosen it herself that morning. I want to look strong, she had whispered. You already are, Carla had replied. Pastor Dwight Hammond sat on the opposite side. Still suited. Still solemn. But his hands shook slightly now. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he did not respond. The jury filed in, 12 faces pale and still. The judge cleared her throat. Will the foreperson please rise? A middle-aged black woman stood, hands trembling around the verdict form. In the case of the state versus Dwight Hammond, on the charge of aggravated criminal sexual abuse of a minor. A pause. The world held its breath. We find the defendant guilty. Gasps. Cries. A rush of emotion surged through the room. Ayanna flinched. Holder reached over and took her hand. Pastor Dwight did not move. His lawyer's face fell. The foreperson continued. On the charge of criminal predatory assault of a child, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. A wave of reaction hit the courtroom. Ayanna turned to Carla. Did they say guilty? Carla nodded. They did. The judge lifted her gavel. Sentencing will commence next week. Until then, the defendant is to be taken into custody immediately. 2 bailiffs approached the pastor. For the first time, his face cracked. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. As the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he turned toward the audience, searching for someone to defend him. No one stood. No one spoke. Outside the courthouse, the crowd swelled. Some held signs, "Believe black girls." Others knelt quietly. A group of students from Ayanna's school lit candles on the steps. Inside, Miss Reynolds stood at the back of the room. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She did not move forward. She did not speak. But her face said everything. "Forgive me." The judge rose. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Ayanna leaned her head against Holder's shoulder. Is it over now? Holder whispered, "The hurt never ends all at once. But the danger is gone." Carla kissed Ayanna's temple. "He cannot touch you ever again." Ayanna closed her eyes. She was not smiling. But she was not afraid. If you were the judge, what would you decide here? As Pastor Dwight was led away, one man in the gallery stood. He was a deacon from the church. He raised his voice. "She told the truth. And we should have listened sooner." The courtroom was silent again. This time, in shame. And justice finally stood at the door. And justice finally stood at the door. The world began to shift. The church doors reopened, but not for worship. Inside New Grace Fellowship, volunteers removed banners that once bore Pastor Dwight's image. The stained glass window behind the pulpit had been replaced with a simple cross. No gold. No glory. In the front row sat Ms. Denise, the custodian who had spoken up. Her hands trembled as she scrubbed the wood beneath the pews. "I walked past her every Sunday," she whispered. "I cleaned where she sat. I heard her cries in the hallway once. And I told myself not to get involved." Outside, a new sign was hung over the church entrance. Children's voices matter. Even when the world ignores them. Ayanna never saw it. She was miles away, sitting in a sunlit room at a residential trauma center. Her bed was made neatly. Her bookshelf filled with picture books and a soft toy bunny. She was still quiet. Still guarded. But she no longer flinched when someone entered the room. Carla visited often. She brought sketchbooks and sat beside her without speaking, just drawing. Trees. Rivers. Houses. Quiet things. One day, Ayanna finally spoke again. "I want to draw a door," she said. Carla smiled. "What kind of door?" "One that only opens when people really listen." Meanwhile, Officer Holder stood before a group of cadets at the academy. Her voice was strong. Focused. She was ignored 3 times, by a school, by a system, by a court. Because she was small. Because she was poor. Because she was black. The room was silent. "Never again," she said. At City Hall, the mayor signed the Ayanna Act, mandating mandatory reevaluation of dismissed child abuse claims and new funding for training in racial bias and trauma-informed reporting. In the local paper, an editorial ran with the headline, "We did not believe her. We must believe the next one." People began to reflect. Miss Reynolds, her teacher, resigned. Mrs. Kent, the school nurse, started working with the new district trauma response team. Even the church elders issued a statement. "We failed a child of God. Not because we hated her, but because we did not see her. And we must learn to see." At the hospital, Dr. LeMay reviewed Ayanna's chart one final time before closing it. He paused at the signature on the bottom. She changed everything, he murmured. Then he added one line in the notes: initial hesitation due to perceived unreliability of patient background, acknowledged as racial bias. It was the first time he had ever admitted it in writing. Back at the center, Ayanna taped a drawing to her wall. It was a house with no doors, just wide windows and an open roof. Underneath, she had written, "Now I can breathe." But even as the world began to heal, one question still lingered in every mind. But one question still remained. At last, the truth was undeniable. The courtroom sat empty now. The pews were cold. The echo of the gavel still haunted its corners, but no one returned to visit that space, not the press, not the jurors, not even the judge. Only Ayanna's name remained in its memory. 3 weeks after the guilty verdict, sentencing was announced. 35 years without parole. Registered for life. Permanent removal from the clergy. Pastor Dwight Hammond would never walk free again. The judge's words rang clear: this court recognizes that the failure to act on Ayanna J's behalf was not just legal, it was moral. Racial bias clouded judgment at every level. This justice comes late. But it comes with clarity. Ayanna watched the ruling from the trauma center's rec room, seated between Carla and Officer Holder. She did not smile. But she did exhale. "Does that mean I'm safe forever?" she asked quietly. Carla nodded. "Yes, baby. Forever." The room behind them was filled with small symbols of her strength, a wall of drawings, a poster that read, "I am not invisible," and a growing stack of letters from strangers across the country. One read, "You gave me the courage to tell my truth." Another said, "Your voice reminded me to listen to my students." The world had changed because one little black girl refused to be silent, even when her body was broken, even when the system turned its face, even when the church, school, and court tried to hide behind doubt. In a private letter, the judge had written, "We failed her because she was black. Because she was small. Because her pain was inconvenient. That must never happen again." Ayanna never returned to her old neighborhood. Instead, she moved in with Claire, the kind foster mother who stayed even after the papers were filed. They planted sunflowers in the backyard. Ayanna named hers Hope. And every week, Carla visited. She brought cookies, books, and sometimes, just silence. Because some days, silence was all Ayanna needed. And some days, she filled that silence with her voice. "I want to help other girls," she said one evening. "The ones who are too scared to say anything." "You already have," Holder said. "You helped the whole world hear them." At the new City Children's Center, a mural now covers the west wall. It shows Ayanna standing in a field, her eyes closed, face to the sun, butterflies around her. Above her head, bold letters read, "Black children's voices must never be ignored." That mural is not just art. It is a promise. A promise carved out of pain. A promise whispered in courtrooms and hospitals. A promise shouted through silence. A promise Ayanna made, and kept. What would you have done if you were in that police station? Comment below. Some promises hurt, but this one saved her life.